Welcome to Tell Me More, stories told as podcasts. Today we're diving into a dark chapter of American history, the Osage Indian murders. It's a story of unimaginable cruelty, a fight for justice that continues even to this day.
It's really the contrast in this case that's so striking. We're talking about the Osage Nation in Oklahoma, early 1900s. They were, for a time, considered the wealthiest people per capita in the world. Because oil, and I mean a lot of oil, was discovered on their land.
So they hit the jackpot, but then what went wrong?
Each member of the Osage Nation received something called a head right. Think of it as like a share of the oil profits, guaranteeing them a steady stream of income. And it was meant to be a blessing, but it attracted, well, the worst kind of attention.
So this sudden wealth made them targets.
Precisely. Over a period of about 13 years, from 1918 to 1931, a wave of murders swept through the Osage community. We're talking at least 60 confirmed deaths. But some estimates suggest the true number could be in the hundreds.
That's horrifying. What were the circumstances surrounding these deaths? Was it like random violence, or was there a pattern?
The methods were chillingly varied. Shootings, poisonings, even a bombing so powerful it shook the entire town. But what connected these seemingly disparate acts were the victims, wealthy Osage individuals with valuable head rights.
So it wasn't just about robbing them, it was about inheriting their wealth through murder.
Exactly. And as the body count rose, a climate of fear and suspicion really gripped the Osage Nation. They were living in a community where they couldn't even trust their neighbors, unsure who might be the next target.
It's hard to imagine. That level of terror they must have felt.
Yeah.
Did the local authorities do anything to investigate these crimes?
That's where it gets even more disturbing. Local law enforcement was largely ineffective, and some were even suspected of being complicit in the killings. Imagine living in a place where you couldn't even trust the people who were supposed to protect you.
Just like something out of a nightmare. But somebody must have stepped in eventually. How did these murders finally come to light?
Well, amidst the chaos and fear, a truly sinister figure emerged. William Hale, a prominent rancher with a thirst for power and wealth. He orchestrated a chilling conspiracy to marry his nephews into Osage families and then eliminate them, one by one, to inherit their head rights.
So he was basically playing a long game, using his family members as pawns in this deadly scheme.
Exactly, and he was incredibly meticulous. One of the most heartbreaking cases involves Anna Brown, a young Osage woman, found dead in a ravine. Her death was initially dismissed as an alcohol-related accident, but later investigations revealed she had been murdered, and the trail led back to Hale.
This is where the story takes a chilling turn. It's not just about the facts, but the psychology behind it. What kind of mind could conceive of such a plan?
It speaks to the depths of human greed and the length to which some will go to acquire wealth and power. But Hale's web of deceit began to unravel when one of his intended victims survived. Molly Burkhart, married to Hale's nephew, was slowly being poisoned. But thanks to a timely warning from her priest, she managed to escape death.
Molly's survival must have been a huge turning point in the investigation.
Absolutely. Her testimony was crucial in exposing Hale's conspiracy. However, the fight for justice was far from over. As the investigation gained momentum, witnesses and potential informants started turning up dead. Hale used his influence to obstruct justice at every turn.
So it was a race against time, trying to uncover the truth before Hale could silence everyone who could testify against him.
Exactly. The situation was so dire that the Bureau of Investigation, the precursor to the FBI, was called in.
This must have been a huge undertaking for the fledgling FBI. What were the unique challenges they faced in investigating this case?
The agents were walking into a hornet's nest of corruption and intimidation. They had to operate undercover, facing constant threats, and trying to piece together a complex puzzle where the stakes were incredibly high.
It sounds like they were walking a tightrope, risking their own lives to bring these criminals to justice.
That's a great way to put it. Their investigation was meticulous, and it eventually led them to build a case against Hale and his accomplices.
This brings us to the trials. What was the public's reaction to these shocking revelations?
The trials, which took place between 1926 and 1929, captivated the nation. They revealed the extent of the conspiracy and the depths of Hale's depravity. These weren't just isolated incidents. They pointed to a systemic pattern of exploitation and violence directed at the Osage people.
This is where the story transcends a simple crime drama and becomes a commentary on broader societal issues.
Absolutely. It raises questions about power, greed, and the exploitation of vulnerable communities.
And I bet our listeners are eager to know, what happened to Hale and
Yes.
his collaborators? Did they face justice for their crimes?
Yes, after a long and arduous legal battle, Hale and several of his associates were convicted. Hale, the mastermind behind it all, was sentenced to life in prison. Some of his accomplices received lesser sentences, but the reign of terror had finally been brought to an end.
That's a relief to hear. But I imagine the scars of this tragedy run deep within the Osage community. What happened in the aftermath of the trials?
You're right, justice was served, but it couldn't erase the pain and suffering endured by the Osage people. The trauma of these events reverberated through generations. Many murders remained unsolved, leaving families without closure, and the chilling realization that their wealth had made them targets left a lasting sense of vulnerability.
It's a stark reminder that sometimes, even in the face of justice, true healing can be a long and difficult process. Did anything change legally to protect the Osage people going forward?
Yes, in response to these horrific crimes, Congress enacted legislation to protect Osage head rights, making it more difficult for outsiders to exploit their wealth. It was a step in the right direction, but it couldn't fully address the underlying issues of prejudice and discrimination that had made the Osage so vulnerable in the first place.
It's a reminder that legal victories are important, but they're only part of the solution. True justice requires addressing the root causes of injustice, which can often be far more complex and challenging.
Precisely. And the Osage Nation's fight for justice didn't end with the trials. They continued to seek recognition and compensation for the mismanagement of their oil wealth by the U.S. government. This legal battle spanned decades, showcasing their resilience and determination.
This speaks to a pattern we see throughout history: the exploitation of indigenous communities and their resources. It's as if the very act of possessing something valuable makes them a target.
That's a keen observation. The Osage Indian murders, while a particularly horrific example, expose a larger systemic issue: the disregard for indigenous rights and sovereignty. It's a pattern that's been repeated throughout history, and sadly, we still see echoes of it today.
It's a sobering reminder that we need to be vigilant about protecting the rights of all people, especially those who have historically been marginalized and oppressed.
Absolutely. And the Osage Nation, despite facing unimaginable adversity, has shown incredible strength and resilience. They continue to fight for their rights, their culture, and their heritage. And in 2011, they achieved a major victory, winning a $380 million settlement from the U.S. government for the mismanagement of their oil wealth.
That's a significant victory, but I imagine no amount of money can truly compensate for the pain and suffering they've endured.
You're right. The settlement was an important step towards accountability, but it doesn't erase the past. However, it does provide the Osage Nation with resources to invest in their future and continue their journey of healing and revitalization.
So while the Osage Indian murders represent a dark chapter in American history,
Right.
the story doesn't end there. It's a story of resilience, perseverance, and the ongoing fight for justice.
Exactly. And it's a story that has relevance for all of us. It reminds us that the pursuit of wealth and power can corrupt even the most seemingly upstanding individuals. It highlights the dangers of prejudice and discrimination, and it underscores the importance of amplifying the voices of those who have been marginalized and silenced.
It's easy to get caught up in the true crime aspect of this story, but it's essential to remember the human cost behind the headlines and the legal battles are real people whose lives were irrevocably altered by these events.
That's a crucial point. The Osage Indian murders weren't just a historical event. They were a tragedy that shattered lives and continues to impact generations. It's important to remember that these weren't just statistics. They were individuals with families, dreams, and aspirations.
And their stories deserve to be heard and remembered. It's a reminder that history isn't just about dates and events. It's about the human stories that shape our understanding of the world.
Absolutely. And by learning about the past, we can gain insights into the present and work towards a future where such injustices are never repeated.
This is where it gets fascinating for me. What can we learn from the Osage Indian murders that can help us address similar issues today? Are there any parallels to contemporary events that our listeners should be aware of?
The Osage Indian murders serve as a stark warning against unchecked greed and the abuse of power. They demonstrate the devastating impact of prejudice and discrimination, and they highlight the importance of protecting the rights of vulnerable communities, particularly indigenous communities, who have historically been targeted for their resources. and land.
So this isn't just a historical event, it's a story with contemporary relevance.
Exactly. We see similar patterns of exploitation and injustice playing out in various parts of the world today, whether it's land grabs, environmental destruction, or the violation of indigenous rights. The echoes of the Osage Indian murders can be heard in these contemporary struggles.
It's a reminder that we need to be aware of these issues and actively work to dismantle systems of oppression that perpetuate these injustices.
Absolutely. And it's not just about grand gestures. It's about being mindful in our daily lives, challenging prejudice when we see it, and advocating for those whose voices are being silenced.
It's about recognizing that we all have a role to play in creating a more just and equitable world. Speaking of playing a role, are there any specific actions our listeners can take to support the Osage Nation or learn more about their ongoing efforts to preserve their culture and heritage?
There are many ways to get involved. The Osage Nation has a website and social media channels where you can learn about their history, culture, and current initiatives. You can also support organizations that advocate for indigenous rights and sovereignty.
And I'd encourage our listeners to seek out stories, films, and books created by Osage people. Hearing their voices and perspectives is crucial to understanding their experiences and supporting their journey of healing and revitalization.
That's a great suggestion. It's important to remember that the Osage Nation is not defined by this tragedy. They have a rich and vibrant culture, a strong sense of community, and an unwavering spirit.
Their story is one of resilience, resistance, and the enduring power of the human spirit.
And it's a story that deserves to be told and remembered.
It's truly inspiring to see how the Osage Nation has emerged from such darkness, holding on to their identity and fighting for their future. As we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you hope our listener takes away from this story?
For me, it's the importance of remembering the victims, their families, and the community that endured such horrific acts, and remembering that justice, while crucial, is only one step in a much longer journey of healing and reconciliation.
It's about recognizing that these weren't just isolated crimes, but a symptom of a much deeper problem, a system that allowed for the exploitation and marginalization of an entire people.
Yeah, and it's a reminder that those systems of oppression, fueled by greed and prejudice, still exist today. So we must remain vigilant in challenging them and fighting for a more equitable world.
This case is so multi-layered. We've explored the greed, the violence, the fight for justice. But what about the psychology of it all? What does it tell us about human nature?
It's a chilling reminder that the human capacity for cruelty is, sadly, boundless. Hale and his associates were driven by an insatiable desire for wealth and power, a desire so strong it blinded them to the value of human life.
And it's almost more disturbing that these weren't crimes of passion or sudden rage. They were meticulously planned, executed with chilling precision.
Right, that cold, calculated approach makes it even more difficult to comprehend. It forces us to confront the darker aspects of human nature and ask ourselves how such atrocities are even possible.
It's a question that has haunted humanity for centuries. But amidst the darkness, we also see glimmers of hope. The resilience of the Osage people, their refusal to be silenced, their unwavering pursuit of justice. That's incredibly inspiring.
Absolutely. Their story is a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the power of community. They faced unimaginable trauma, but emerged from it with a determination to heal, rebuild, and reclaim their rightful place in the world.
So while this deep dive has taken us into some very dark corners of history, it ultimately leaves us with a sense of hope.
Yeah, it's a reminder that even in the face of immense adversity, the human spirit can endure. It's a call to action, urging us to learn from the past, confront injustice in the present, and work towards a future where such tragedies are never repeated.
Well said. And on that note, we wrap up this deep dive into the Osage Indian murders. It's a story that challenges us, compels us, and ultimately leaves us with a profound sense of responsibility.
I hope our listener will continue to explore this case and delve deeper into the history and culture of the Osage Nation. Their story is one of resilience, resistance, and the enduring power of the human spirit. It's a story that deserves to be told, remembered, and honored.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.